How can we use social and digital for more than just sharing what we had for dinner and actually using it as a business building tool?
What's so crucial is remembering that you want to fish where the fish are, right? So you want to be where your target audience is at. And most people have this concern of, well, I have to be everywhere. And
Yes.
you don't have to be everywhere. You just have to be where your market is.
Mhm. Your online profile is usually the first impression people have of you in our digital world. So, how do you stand out from the crowd and own your value so that you can attract and convert clients? Today, I'm speaking with Leslie Hughes. She's dubbed the social media guru by CBC Radio. She's a social media specialist, LinkedIn profile writer, and the principal of Punch Media. Leslie has been in the digital landscape for over 20 years and founded her digital agency in 2009. She's worked with many high-profile companies across North America to help them optimize their professional presence and convert clients. She's a regular radio and television guest talking about how to manage your digital identity and how to leverage LinkedIn for social selling. And she's the author of Create, Connect, and Convert, which is designed to help you own your value and build a powerful professional presence without feeling like you're bragging. Welcome to the show today, Leslie. I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
My pleasure. And we're going to have a great conversation about the whole topic of LinkedIn and our profiles. And I can't wait to leverage all your expertise on that. But why don't we start by just sort of setting the stage a little bit? You've been in business specifically in the digital world for over 20 years. Can you share a little bit about how you got started in this field and how you've built your own business?
Isn't it crazy to think that not social media, but digital has been around for 20 years, which is just, it's gone by in a heartbeat. And yet at the same time, that's a long time. So I started really getting excited about digital way back in 96, 97, when I was working as an executive assistant and thought I really wanted to get into this thing called the World Wide Web. I thought that the idea of this non-linear way of communicating was just so fascinating. How could I couldn't really understand how faxes work, but the fact that you could send an email via your computer and end up in somebody else's email was just so exciting. And just the navigation of these websites way back early days, long before Google. And so I just was fascinated with it. I learned HTML way back then. And, that was being very techie. Back in the 90s,
Yes.
was learning the basics of HTML, started working at a magazine called Wedding Bells magazine here in Canada. And I with one other person was the web department. And we basically took whatever was in the traditional magazine and uploaded it to a 500-page website, which before year 2000 was really substantial, and was buying banner advertising and really helping to promote the Wedding Bells magazine as we were launching in the United States. We had a really great presence here in Canada already, and we're launching editions in the United States. So having gone from there, and then I went to a .com for a year, then bounced back to traditional because that was the .bomb era when everything, all these people were getting pink slips from working in these digital marketing agencies. And so I went back to traditional advertising, which then started to it was really starting to evolve with, marrying up traditional and digital with websites and so forth. Went back to Wedding Bells and then started working at Wedding Bells and Fashion Magazine to do sales at that point, but really still had this whole love of social. And then started up my own business after I had my little guy 15 years ago. Then I hung out a shingle to say I would help brands really get involved with digital marketing and strategy and so forth, and started working with, thankfully, the Children's Wish Foundation, which is now the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and TVO, with helping them set up their strategy and just getting people involved in the wonderful world of social. It just sort of was a perfect marriage for me. For, as you can tell, I like to talk. So the social aspect of things, marketing, sales, psychology, all of those things together just really sort of became this perfect storm for me.
Yeah, I just love the evolution of where you've come from in business. And I think that people forget, that 20 years is not a very long time, really, in the grand scheme of things. And the speed of that technology over those 20 years has been so rapid. So I think that having the opportunity to grow up in that environment and really see the progression and see what's working gives you such a comprehensive viewpoint of what's working, what's not, and sort of not falling into, well, here's the latest fad, but sort of drawing on all of those years of experience and sort of seeing how the platforms have grown and evolved over that time.
Oh, absolutely. And they're going to continue to evolve and change. And so I have this struggle to balance social media marketing with digital marketing, right? So we usually use those interchangeably, but really digital really is your website, your email, your e-newsletter, those kinds of things. And then marrying that up with social to a certain extent. But I think one of the things that we tend to forget, and sometimes I even forget, is that these social channels all are membership sites, and you have to be a member in order to see the content on those sites as well. And so we tend to put a lot of our eggs into one social media basket. I know that a lot of people were guilty of doing that with Facebook, and then Facebook changed their algorithm.
Right. Yes.
So it's important to really not depend completely on any social channel. And although I say that though, Natasha, and then I realize that, you know, there's nothing out there that compares to LinkedIn as far as the professional network. And could I pivot away from there? It would be really hard for me to pivot away from LinkedIn.
Yeah. So firstly, I thank you for making that distinction between the social and the digital. Like, I think that is really important. And I know that that's going to come out more as we go further into our discussion today. And yeah, you know, I think that is often the challenge, especially for small business owners. And, you know, you definitely are on the side of both professional and business side. But I know for small business owners, that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is like, how can you be everywhere and omnipresent, not only from a time perspective, but also from a financial perspective? You know, it's all very well for the big companies to say, yes, be everywhere. Well, they have big teams of marketing experts. But I think as an individual, it's much harder to be across all of those platforms and even be an expert in those. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more as well. So Leslie, social media today, we know, is really one of the first ways we connect with people. We're not even often face to face with people. So how can we use social and digital, and I'll let you provide the distinction, but how can we use this platform for more than just sharing what we had for dinner or our latest outfit, and actually using it as a business building tool?
What's so crucial is remembering that you want to fish where the fish are, right? So you want to be where your target audience is at. And I've realized over the years, while I started helping organizations with their Facebook presence and even on Twitter, which I loved Twitter back in 2008, 2009, and now I've pivoted into the world of LinkedIn, I don't focus on those other channels that I'm not going to get the return on investment with. And I think that most people, to your point, have this concern of, well, I have to be everywhere. Yes. And you don't have to be everywhere. You just have to be where your market is and understand that algorithm. And I would rather see small business, even big business, I'd rather see them do one channel very, very well than do poorly at being on all the channels. And it's overwhelming. I've been doing this a long time. I can't keep up with all the changes on every single social channel. I just can't. There's just no way. That's why I think
that's such great advice. And likewise, you know, as a business coach and consultant, people are often looking to me to say, well, which channel should I be on? And I definitely draw on that advice of, well, start where your main audience is. And also for me, it's where you feel comfortable operating as well. Not every platform is for everybody. And so yeah, I agree. You just can't be everywhere.
And understanding your perfect customer, your ideal customer persona so well and so deep that the content that you're producing, the community that you're building resonates with them on such a level that they feel like they get you. And I think what most of us have a tendency of doing is trying to be everything to everyone. And when you're trying to speak to everyone, you're talking to no one. Right. And that sometimes can be really challenging. I know it is for me as well, because we often might think that if I don't broaden my reach, if I don't broaden my scope of who I speak with, then the people will say, well, then she doesn't help me or he doesn't help me. Right. When in fact, it does the opposite.
Yes.
it's so counterintuitive. And yet the more that I niche down to say, this is who I work with, the more I'm building that intimate relationship with that target audience that says, oh, well, you get us, you understand our problems, you understand our challenges. And I think mirroring that to that niche audience of saying, I get where you're at, is definitely going to build trust and resonance much more than it is to be like, well, I help everyone. No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
No, impossible. Well, thank you. I'm sure you've reassured a few of our listeners that are wondering about that today. And we're going to talk more specifically about LinkedIn and some tactics on that in a little while. But I just want to, people are becoming perhaps a little nervous about sharing on social media. And we know that things that you say on social media last forever, or things that you do or pictures that you post can be on social media for a very long time. So I'd love to hear from you how you are dealing with, or how you can recommend what to post to avoid some of this sensitivity, to be able to share your opinion, but avoid some of the sensitivity. And how should we respond when people are posting negative comments, or something is misinterpreted or doesn't land the way we hope in a social media setting?
Well, cancel culture is certainly real. And it's a little scary that the legacy of what we have posted years ago is still on there. And we've seen that sort of by certain celebrities right in the caboose with, oh, I didn't mean it in the context in which it was written years ago.
Yes.
I think there are softwares out there. One of my best friends, who's a public speaker, he has a software or tool that he uses that helps to delete. It goes and deletes past posts for that very reason. But I think at the same time, we're all real, and we're human beings who make mistakes. And if something in your past doesn't necessarily resonate now, it's okay to address that. And I think that we all have to think of ourselves as media agencies. We all have to think of ourselves as public relations professionals to realize that as long as you're apologizing with authenticity, clarifying if something was mistaken in the past. Yet, one of the things that I have been saying since the get-go is never, ever publish anything online that you wouldn't feel comfortable seeing on a billboard in downtown, wherever. If it's Times Square, or if it's downtown Toronto, or wherever the big city is, we have to think of the legacy of the posting that we do now. This is going to blow your mind, Natasha. Our great, 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 great grandchildren are going to be seeing these posts, are going to be seeing these videos of this legacy. And we don't necessarily think about it when we're posting it at the time. Right. And is the brand that we're portraying ourselves out to be, is that who we want people to think of us as? And cheeky, I mean, I teach at a college, so I know sometimes my students will be kind of cheeky or fun or playful in their language, and they've been raised with these digital tools in their pocket. At the same time, remember, cancel culture is real, and people do make mistakes. Almost, there's some really big names out there that have made mistakes, and apologizing sincerely for it is crucial. Now, back to your question about how do you handle it if people are posting negative things on your profile, it's the same idea, is addressing it without getting into a fight. Right. It's creating that space for the person to have their opinion, if they have an opinion, even if it's opposed, if you're in opposition to it, even if you don't believe what they believe. Thank you so much for your opinion. Thank you so much for contributing to the conversation, as long as it's constructive and not destructive. Yes. Trolls are never going to be appeased, right? You never feed the trolls. I've had that happen where somebody went on to one of my blog posts and wrote, "You get paid for this crap." And I had to sit back, Natasha, and I had to say, okay, so how do I handle this? Do I respond to him with my tail between my legs to say, yeah, I do. Why? Do you think I'm not good enough? Or do I respond to him with an aggressive, yes, I do. And yes, regardless, there was nothing that I was going to say that was actually going to contribute to that conversation. I just let it lie, yes. Did not respond to the troll. And interestingly enough, people would private message me and say, what's up with that guy? And I'm like, I know, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, as long as I think think it's okay for everyone, like for people to have a difference of opinion within reason.
Exactly. Yeah, join in the discussion. I love the tip of don't post anything you wouldn't want to see on a billboard. And it's just prompts like that I think can help people manage and regulate what's appropriate or what's inappropriate to put on a social platform. And unfortunately, things that sometimes we think are private are definitely not private in our social media space. So I think that's really great advice. And, I just want to expand on that because you shared an crazy and kind of somewhat scary story with me. And I'm seeing more and more accounts getting hacked and crazy stuff going on. But you shared how someone had actually stolen your identity online and started posting some pretty awful stuff. Can you just share briefly about what happened there and how you dealt with that?
It was one of the craziest things that have ever happened at so many different levels. And it was terrifying as a woman, like sharing content about ourselves, about our whereabouts and what we're doing. Okay, so let me tell you the story first. So in 2009, I was working at Children's Wish at the time, and I got this email from a mutual connection who said, Leslie, this doesn't sound like you. And if it is you, I'm really surprised and I'm really disappointed in you. And I was like, well, what did I do? I haven't done anything. And I looked at the post, and it was a screen grab of a post that had my picture on it. It had my email address on it. And I'll just summarize the copy, which basically said, Dear Anne, you're nothing but a hack and a money grubbing pig. Signed, Leslie Hughes. And within 8 hours, 40 people had responded to this post on this competitor's blog. I hate using the word competitor, but you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
On her blog to say, Leslie Hughes, what kind of a horrible human being are you? Like 40 people in 8 hours was a lot of awareness that was driving that, saying what a horrible person I was. Of course, I hadn't written it. I hadn't been involved in that conversation. I wouldn't, that's just so not me to go out and slam someone for no reason. But there was my picture, my email address, the whole 9 yards. So right away, I called the person whose blog it was on and said it wasn't me. And I don't think they believed me for quite a while. They thought, oh, now she's just been caught and now she's got her tail between her legs. And no. And so finally, the person gave me the IP address. That was, every computer's got a stamp IP address. So the comment, and I went to the police.
Wow.
And which at the time in 2009, I have police officer. I grew up with a lot of police officers, and they're like, there's nothing you can do. Thankfully, thank you, Durham Region Police, because the police officer actually did his due diligence, got the information from Rogers, and it turns out the person was one of those, like what you'd see in a CSI. He looked exactly like what you would see on one of those criminal shows. And the person just said that he did it for fun, that he didn't have anything against me, but he impersonated me to see if he could stir up some problems with my, like, as I said, competitor. And it was so scary, Natasha, from the standpoint of, I just had a little boy, and here he was, I was taking him to preschool, and here's my picture of my son with our dog, and here's my dog's name. And so this digital footprint that I'd been creating, and the legacy that I'd been creating for my son and for me on where I was going and what I was doing and who I was with, that's a lot of information we share about ourselves.
Yes.
And had that not happened to me, I don't think I would have been as cautious to take everything down.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I did start to take everything down. I thought, you know what, actually, my son, who was only 3, hadn't given me permission to share his information about him online either. Yeah. And could there come a day which is now, like when he's 15 and he says, oh, Mom, like, I don't want to have all that information online about me. Well, anyway, so that happened. And then also from the professional standpoint, right? So there's the personal aspect of things that's scary. The professional aspect of things was, now my brand could have been ruined because this troll had done this. And I had to go back. And so a friend and mentor of mine said to me, treat the situation as if you would be working with a client of yours. How would you help them navigate through this? Which was such great advice, because it took me out of victim mode and put me into empowered mode.
Yes.
I wrote a blog about it myself. I told everybody I possibly could. I ended up on CTV's The Social talking about it. So it's helped me to sort of create awareness, because it hasn't happened that often, thankfully, to people. People's accounts have been hacked, not in the same way. So there's nothing, I don't think there's anything I could have done to have prevented it, because it could have happened anyway. I think the way that I reacted spoke volumes. because
Yeah.
I could have gone in a completely different direction. I could have gotten into an online war with this competitor. I
Right.
could have, I could have just, shown up at the other, when I found out who the person was and had the IP address. But I was concerned, there was a lot of concerns out there from both a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint that now has parlayed itself into an opportunity, quite frankly, of telling this crazy story. And I'm no longer in victimhood anymore.
Yeah. So I think a lot of things come out of that. One, I think, is obviously protecting your accounts, being careful about how much private information you do share out there, and just sort of having awareness of that. I think your story is a great lesson to people to let them know. I think there's a whole other conversation about whether we should be posting tons of information about our kids on social media, and again, just because of the legacy. But I think it's, just being prudent, securing your accounts as best as you can. And the obvious thing that sort of comes out for me, because you had such a solid brand, people already recognize that that was out of character for you. So I think when we're not engaging in these online battles and arguments and very aggressive behaviors, perhaps, I'm not sure if aggressive is the right word, confrontational perhaps, it does sort of speak to your brand as well, right? Like if you always engage in that, people might not kind of look at that and say, oh, that was out of character. They might be thinking, well, that maybe is in character. So I really think it speaks to the overall brand that you're portraying out there as well.
I think that's an excellent point. I hadn't really thought about that. So thank you, because there was the person who actually did write the negative stuff on this person's blog. I, of course, was going down like, okay, so who could I have ticked off that would have really wanted to do this for me? And there were some people that were top of mind that I thought, oh, this person is a little bit of a firecracker. They could totally have wanted to start something.
Yes.
And to your point, right? So the brand that I thought with them was troublemaker, disturber, and thankfully people didn't see me through the same lens. And I think the word that a friend of mine uses is imprint, right? When we brand something, we imprint in people's brains who we are. Yeah. And so thank you for that, because I hadn't thought about it from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that story with us. And I'm sure people can relate to that in many different ways. But let's change track a little bit. Your specialty area is LinkedIn, and LinkedIn perhaps has traditionally been seen more as a business platform, a little bit more serious, a little less of that social platform. What are a few of the ways that we can really use LinkedIn to its fullest potential for business building? And probably a follow-up question to that is the tone and vibe of LinkedIn actually changing?
Oh, that's such a good question, because we can look at it through so many different lenses. LinkedIn is the professional network. So thinking about LinkedIn from the psychology of why people are there, it's to invest time. Whereas say Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, some of those other social channels, we're there to waste time. We're there to connect with friends and family and have fun. Not to say that LinkedIn isn't fun, but that's not what we're there for, right? We're not there to connect and look at, to your point, like what someone had for breakfast. Or I've even seen somebody posted, I just taught my daughter how to use the potty this weekend. Kind of not appropriate for the business network. Yeah. Having said that, though, there is sort of this marriage between our professional persona, our professional brand, and our personal brand as well. And not to say that you shouldn't have a personality on LinkedIn. Of course you can. I struggle and straddle with that. The person that I show up with my friends or behind closed doors is a little sassier than the person who shows up on LinkedIn. Yeah. I don't want to alienate my clients. That I'm not Gary Vaynerchuk, right? I can't just show up and start throwing curse bombs everywhere I go, because people are not going to hire me if they think that I'm a little wild and maybe that sassy girl. So finding that sweet spot of make it personal, but not make it too personal, show your personality, but maybe not so much of your personality. There is that sweet spot. I'm also a little bit older than I'm in Gen X, right? So the millennials out there, LinkedIn is really trying to make it very, very friendly for millennials in the next generation to feel included, to participate, the engagement. They want to make it fun and flirty. And I sort of hold on to my seat and go, LinkedIn isn't supposed to be fun and flirty. We're there for business. Like, let's just own the value of staying on the business network. So maybe I'm a little old school. I'm just not into dog stories or cat stories or kid stories on LinkedIn. If I want to get that from someone, I'll go on to and I'll follow them on Instagram or something. So it is finding, and yet I say that, and some other LinkedIn trainers that I know will show I love to barbecue. So here's me on the weekend with, or I'm passionate about this particular sports team, or one of my favorite people, he's a pinball wizard. So he talks about pinball. And so there is a way to infuse your personality. I think keeping it to the scope of who are you speaking to? Don't just make noise for the sake of making noise on these channels, but you're there on LinkedIn for a reason. And typically that's going to be for business. So think about how, even if you are going to tell a personal story, how can you spin it from a perspective, and what is the business lesson that you want people to learn from that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, great advice. So knowing your platform, knowing the audience on the platform, and knowing the reason people are there, I think that distinction is very important. And yeah, I liked the word of, spending time versus investing in time, or wasting time and investing in time. So I think that is a good way to sum up LinkedIn for sure. So thank you for that. And, I want to talk a little bit more about now, like really where you specialize, which is telling the story and helping people with their profiles and, punching up their profile. I want to share this because I think this is important for this part of the conversation, but you've been dubbed the social media guru. That's a pretty powerful descriptor. It definitely attracts attention and helps you stand out from the crowd. Why is a strong profile so important from this business standpoint? And I think more to the point, because a lot of people would have difficulty owning that. How can we share our value and create that strong presence without feeling like we're bragging about our expertise?
I think that is the lion's share of what I do, is helping people feel comfortable standing in their value and telling their story without sounding like they're bragging. I thought this was such a Canadian thing. I'm sure you will resonate that it's not just a Canadian thing, and it's an everybody thing, especially with the leaders of today that are realizing that to be an authentic and great leader is to be to provide servant leadership. And so the spotlight, most of us have not been raised to have the spotlight on ourselves. We've been raised to be humble. We've been raised to not brag about ourselves, which is great, because who wants to work with the person who says, I'm so amazing at what I do? Like, nobody wants to work with that person. Yet LinkedIn is a channel where we're supposed to stand in our value. We're supposed to include our accomplishments. We're supposed to let people know how good we are at what we do, because if we don't, then people don't know that we're good at what we do. And who wants to work with somebody who's not great at what they do? Everybody wants to work with the best in class. So having said that, we have to again remember that we're writing for the reader. We're there for them. We're there to be of service to them. And one of the great ways that you can stand in your value without bragging is to make it about them. To say, I'm driven to produce these results. I'm passionate about helping people accomplish these accomplishments. When you're doing it for them, it's not about you. It's about being of service and accomplishing their goals, accomplishing things for them. Regardless of whether you're a small business owner, or even if you're working in an organization and you're the brand ambassador of an organization. I think everybody should be a brand ambassador of the organization. Stand in the value of what you do, what makes you uniquely different than what's your superpower. And if you have, so sometimes it could be how many years of experience you've had. Sometimes it could be what awards you've won. Sometimes it could be certain brands that you've worked with. Sometimes it's, I achieved year-over-year growth of saving money and saving time, or whatever it is. So all of those things are your unique value. So that's the hardest part, because even the most senior executives I have worked with will tell me, like, confidentially, that they have imposter syndrome. That they still feel like they're not enough, that if only people knew that they were they felt like the 16-year-old dork that couldn't get a date in high school, then the whole, universe will crumble apart. So you think we all have that. And it's quite refreshing to me to hear from these executives that they still sort of have that, but they just show up and they do the good work and put one foot in front of the other like everybody else. So having said that, when I was dubbed the social media guru by CBC Radio, which was years ago, my friend and colleague, she's a competitor slash colleague of mine because she's been a friend and mentor for a long time, said, you got to put that on everything. And like everybody else, I don't know, but everyone's going to think I'm bragging. Everyone's going to think I'm full of myself. And it's taken me a long time, and I'm still struggle with it, to go, yeah, that's me. Oh, how that's all right, baby. Because again, I don't want to come across as seeming like I'm full of myself. But it happened. And getting that third-party endorsement from CBC Radio when they introduced me, I was like, well, that's, instead of me calling myself an expert, somebody else did. So yes, that sounds pretty good. And I did start putting that on everything. I want people to recognize the value that I bring, and I want that. And typically it's that third-party endorsement from other people that will actually help you stand out as an expert more than you telling people that you're amazing at what you do.
And that's a great tip. And by the way, you are the social media guru, clearly. Otherwise, we wouldn't be chatting today. But yes, I think those third-party endorsements are really important. And, to expand on that question just a little bit further around the profile, if someone who's listening today was thinking that it's time for a bit of a profile refresh on LinkedIn, or maybe even on one of the other platforms, what are 3 things that you think I'm going to use LinkedIn because that's where you specialize, but 3 things that every LinkedIn profile needs to really stand out and attract attention?
Every single person out there really needs to be thinking about what's in it for my target audience, what's in it for my customers, my clients, whomever it is I'm trying to impress. So the 3 things that I would focus on specifically on LinkedIn would be photo, headline, and then the summary or the about section. So this can go across all sorts of channels, because most of them will have an image, either a headline and or a bio in there. Mm-hmm. There's a quote from a 16th century philosopher by the name of Blaise Pascal, who said, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. Narrowing down your value proposition into a few words or a few sentences is really challenging. And as a chatty girl, I will tell you, it doesn't always work for me. Photo is so crucial. Photo is that first impression people are going to see when they see your face and they see you. And I have seen every photo out there, from no photo at all, which is really bad, to people with no clothes on, if you can believe it. There are shirtless, bikini top, people, I've seen them, people smoking, people drinking cocktails, all sorts of photos out there. I think at the very least, put a shirt on if you're on the professional network. I think that is probably the smartest thing to do. But we all carry our cell phones in our pockets that have cameras in them. And so even if you can't get to or can't afford a professional photographer for a headshot, simply just play around and don't take selfies, but put a shirt on, look into the camera, smiling, look professional, look confident, look approachable. Mm-hmm. And Natasha, I tell people this all the time and they still never go and change that, but that's the first impression people see. So it is one of the most important aspects. And people from around the world, I teach a lot of people from other countries, and they have a more formal headshot often where they're not smiling. Psychologically, we want someone who is smiling and looking into the camera, as if we're creating rapport with them from the get-go. Mm-hmm. So once the photo's done, and that should be the easiest one, but seems to be the hardest one, because I hate having my picture taken as well, is the headline. And so after your name, your first name, your last name, your headline is the next area that people are going to look at. Sometimes people will put title at company. And then people are like, so what's principal at Punch Media mean? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean anything to anyone. Yeah. For me, it's focusing on the value proposition I bring. I focus on LinkedIn. So that's the first word that's sitting in my LinkedIn headline is LinkedIn profile writer. Mm-hmm. There's no mention of Punch Media for me, because I don't work at an organization. Like Punch Media isn't a well-known brand. So I'm going to use my 240 characters, 220 characters. I'm going to use those 220 characters to tell a very succinct story. Mm-hmm. And mine's focused on keywords. Other people, what I would say is sometimes it could be title at the company that you're working at or working for, and then put in a little bit of a value proposition statement, helping this target audience achieve these results. Right. Because people will forget that even your title at your company name. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, unless you have a well-known brand, people don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Tell your target audience that you help them solve a problem.
Right.
So that, or maybe it's a tagline or a value proposition. So headline really should talk to your audience. This is how I help you. And then as I continue down the funnel, the last thing is probably the hardest part, is writing your summary. It's got two names: the about section, the summary section is your elevator pitch.
Right.
And that takes the longest time, which is why I charge what I do to do what I do. It is the most challenging thing to get on the same side of the table as your potential client, hiring manager, whomever it is that you're looking to impress, to write for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing it because what I say often is, when you're inside the jar, you can't see the label.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard to write about yourself.
Yeah, it is.
It is so hard because we know what we do, but we don't know what we do uncommonly well. And so we just, that's just normal. This is what I do. This is how I show up. Well, maybe what you do is actually your superpower.
Yeah.
So understanding who the target audience is, writing in first person, ideally. I am, because from what I've done my research here, a bio of third person Leslie Hughes isn't as warm and friendly as the I am. And again, you're writing for the reader, you're trying to create rapport, you're trying to create that intimate relationship with. So I write for my clients, I write them in first person. You know, I have had over X number of years experience helping this target audience achieve these results. Here are some of the, I'm just sort of making up as I go, but in my past position, here's some of the things that I have done or here's my education.
Mm-hmm.
So just so that your reader understands that this isn't your first dog and pony show, right, that you've done this before, you understand it, whether it's your education and your accreditation and or the brands that you've worked with or the results you've produced. Your entire picture is your story. Mm-hmm. It gets more complicated, as you know, Natasha, as someone sort of ladders up through their career to tell that story. When they're entry level or students, it's easy enough to tell a very succinct story of saying, I'm an aspiring blankety blank, and here's some of the courses that I've taken, and I also volunteer at this, and I'm looking for employment opportunities. Yeah. The more someone has moved in their career, the more complicated the story is, yet all of those things do matter. Mm-hmm. So stand in those accomplishments, tell people that you've been humbled to have been recognized. You have been honored to have been recognized. Then you're not sounding like you're bragging, right? It's either your peers have given you the nod, or your clients have given you the nod that you are great at what you do. And then the most important thing as a marketer, you want to have a call to action. Do you want people to reach out to you? Yeah. Let them know. How can, do you have any questions? Here's my email address. Here's my phone number. Senior executives don't put that out there. They don't want to have all of their information out there because people will ask if they're, are you hiring? Right. As a small business owner if you're in sales, make it easy. Make it easy for people to reach you. Make it as turnkey and try to inspire them to call you. Mm-hmm.
Great advice. And again, not as easy as it seems on the surface, but good photo, a clear headline, and at least some descriptor, so it builds your credibility and people know how to get in touch with you. So sometimes we can overcomplicate it, but I think if we're just getting started, that would be great. And if people need a little bit more help, I'm going to tell them they can connect with you as well. So as we wrap up, if you could share your biggest lessons learned or one important takeaway when you're using social media or working in this digital space, what would that be? What would be the golden nugget that you would share with people?
If I had a do-over, I hope that I would want to recognize the value that I bring earlier on in the process. I think the biggest mistake I see on social media is that people don't use it because they're terrified, afraid of making a mistake, afraid of what are people going to say? Are people going to say, who do you think you are? And to your point, kind of going back to that brand association, when I got into the quote unquote, when I got into trouble, or when someone hacked my account and pretended to be me, my brand had already imprinted on people that I wasn't that person. And so it did help other people rally behind me and help me to tell that story that it wasn't me, because I'd already created that brand for myself. So I think the biggest mistake is just not using it and being afraid that other people are going to judge me for for putting content out there. There's a huge opportunity. I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but probably less than 10% of people are actually sharing content on LinkedIn. And so there's a huge opportunity for people to be that thought leader, to share great content, whether it's your own created content or you're resharing curated content, that you're educating and empowering your network. And the only caution that I have is if you are working for another organization, of course, follow their social media policy. And I typically will say, follow what your marketing team has already put out there. So that's the easiest way to reshare posts from your organization is follow your own company page, reshare the posts from your company page, offer the marketing team, if you're not already a marketer, offer the marketing team, I would be willing to be interviewed. I would be willing to, be that thought leader, show people that you have something to contribute because nobody knows what you know from your perspective.
Well, thank you. That is the golden nugget for sure. And really, I think you've given some very practical advice on how you can get out there, share content the right way, or in a safe way, and really stand out from the crowd. So Leslie, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me today and sharing such valuable information with all of our audience here.
I love it. I mean, you can tell I like to talk. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. And if you'd like to connect with Leslie or you need help with your LinkedIn profile creation, you can find Leslie, of course, on LinkedIn at Leslie Hughes, or you can email her at leslie@punchmedia.ca, and I'll be leaving her contact information in the show notes below. And Leslie has kindly offered a discount for the first 5 people that book her to help them with their LinkedIn profile of $100 off. And all you need to do is just mention code Inspire and Drive. So thank you for that generous bonus as well, Leslie.
I have never offered a discount ever. So this is the first time I've ever done this. So that's because I really like you, Natasha. So I am really looking forward to connecting with your audience. So
thank you. Well, we'll feel privileged. Thank you. And if you'd like my help on any of your strategies to grow your business the simple way, you can visit me at inspireanddrive.com and download my simple business blueprint or schedule a discovery call. And that's all for this week. Join me in the next episode where I'll be sharing more expert interviews on the best tips to grow your business. Bye for now. And remember, let's keep things simple.